can.
I think I read both sides of it.
Years I had to say, oh, come manual, and I couldn't think that. Said we didn't say it.
Good morning to everyone. Yeah, 10 o'clock. So, and it's a great pleasure to be doing the second of these lectures, which, you know, at the beginning are more meditations, really, with a little theological twist. Is one of the things I like to do. I'm afraid I'll have to leave slightly earlier today because I'm celebrating. It's the first time I'm celebrating here, so I really need to be leaving a little bit earlier to prepare for this. So the topic I've chosen for today is in connection, obviously, with the liturgical time. Please do come in, and there is a page available. Yes, so David, thank you for giving it to people. Yes. So in connection is with the liturgical time, Advent, okay, and Advent and advocacy is not just playing with words. Of course, you know, there is a connection which sounds nice, but also this is really the topic of, or at least something which is entirely, absolutely central to the mission of he who is coming, who is advening, the Messiah. So number one in your handout, a text we know very well from the prophet Isaiah, which also was quoted in the Messiah we reflected upon last time. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. Then shall build up the ancient ruins, they shall raise the former devastations, they shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations. Now, on the 15th of September, 1993, in the city of Palermo in Sicily, a 56-year-old man was killed outside his home by a single bullet shot at point-blank range. One of the hitmen who killed him later repented and revealed that the victim smiled at him and that his last words were, "I've been expecting you." The victim was Father Pino Puglisi, a parish priest of Brancaccio, one of the poorest areas of the city, heavily controlled by the mafia. During the beginning of the 90s in Italy, a number of exceptionally brave judges and prosecutors started to challenge the mafia with unprecedented energy, despite the inertia of a thoroughly corrupt political class, which was about to be entirely swept away by a nationwide judicial investigation known as Mani Pulite, clean hands. And one of the main strategies of the mafia up to that moment had been its aversion to public displays of strength. It thrived in the dark, relied on a deeply entrenched connivance on the part of everyone, motivated by interest or by fear. There's a special word in Italian for this attitude, you might know that. It's called omertà, that is conniving silence. It was common for politicians and bishops to deny that the mafia even existed in Sicily. Can you imagine that? Then all of a sudden, the criminal organization resorted to large-scale bombings, to murder two leading magistrates. You might remember that. It was absolutely dreadful, ghastly. The universal shock generated by these events proved that the mafia felt threatened as never before. Paired with these high-profile assassinations, the killing of the Sicilian priest might have gone unnoticed, especially because the mafia made it look as if it was robbery by a drug addict gone wrong. Instead, the emotion was unprecedented. Never before had the mafia killed a priest. Pope John Paul II condemned the murder, and the unknown vicar became a national hero who was beatified as a martyr a few years later. Not only the hitmen, but also the instigators were rapidly brought to justice and condemned to life sentences. Even though the mafia still is a powerful international criminal organization, its hold on Sicilian and Italian public life has never been the same after these events. Ordinary people were emboldened and started to break the wall of omertà, of conniving silence, which had been the mafia's most enduring advantage until then. For most of his life, Don Pino Puglisi had been a lonely, a maverick, a thorny voice crying out in the desert, a bit like John the Baptist, who is the hero of this time of Advent. He was very mild-mannered, spoke without emphasis, simply, but was loud and clear in his denunciation of the culture that enabled the mafia to thrive, especially its pretense of respectability. For many unemployed and prospectless young people, the mafia offered not only the promise of easy money through drug dealing and the selling of contraband cigarettes, but especially a recognizable identity and belonging that conferred status, commanded respect, and instilled fear. How could a marginal and defenseless priest be perceived as a threat by one of the most formidable criminal organizations of the world? Just by doing what the prophet Isaiah says, what we have just read in this passage of Isaiah. He brought freedom to those oppressed by the fear of retaliation. He actively prevented young people from being attracted in the gravitational orbit of the mafia by helping them not to drop out of school, offering them alternative models of life, creating a healthy environment where they could gather and play safely. In this way, he threatened the easy recruitment of manpower for the criminal organization. Where his action most deeply vexed the mafia, however, was in his ability to puncture its pretense of respectability. Father Puglisi's main power lay in his voice, Advocacy is the voice inside advocacy, voice. In the freedom with which he spoke in his sermons and his teaching, he was totally straightforward. So the things everyone was afraid even just to whisper, thereby bringing good news to the oppressed, as Isaiah says, binding up the brokenhearted, comforting those who mourned. He could free people because his faith made him a man free from the fear of death and of reprisal. What was the secret of his extraordinary courage? Where did his voice and his witness draw their capacity to repair ruined cities, the devastation of many generations? Again, a passage from Isaiah at the end of the number 1. The answer comes from the second passage which I quoted in the handout, text number 2, which is in 2 Corinthians, where Paul blesses the Father of compassion and comfort because he comforted him in all his afflictions. And in this way, he enabled him, Paul, to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which he himself was comforted by God. Now, the word comfort in Greek is paraklesis, number 2. Is number 2 or 3? Yes, still number 2 in your handout. And can be translated in Greek as advocacy. So paraclete, the paraclete is the advocate. Sometimes you hear the Holy Gospel called the advocate, the paraclete. So as advocacy. I know advocate is a bad sound. So we should take the good thing about being an advocate, the advocacy, a word that etymologically means voice in favor of, ad vox, vox for, okay? Here lies the secret of the extraordinary power of Father Puglisi's voice, of his advocacy, voice for. Like John the Baptist, he did not see himself as the savior of the people entrusted to him. How could someone who knew he could be killed at any moment and eventually was save anyone else? He simply saw himself as a witness testifying to the light, as the advocate, the voice that speaks to, the voice that speaks for. He knew how to appeal to the conscience of people. One of his favorite sentences was, in Italian is, se ognuno fa qualcosa, allora si può fare molto. If everyone does something, then we can do a lot. The man who killed him repented and converted. And this is the reason we know Father Puglisi's last words before he died. Advocacy, however, is much more than simply speaking instead of or for. This can be very patronizing. It can empower some people and disempower other people. So it's good to speak for other people, and yet at the same time, it's not really the deepest or the most effective way of being an advocate, practicing advocacy. It is much more than simply speaking instead or speaking for. Had this been the case, when Father Puglisi died, everything he had tried to build would have ended with him. Instead, I put this in number 3 on your handout, he understood advocacy means giving a voice to other people. It is helping everyone to find their own voice, teaching them to make themselves heard, understand their rights, express their views. Just as with racism, number 4, in most of our debates about criminality today, few people truly understand the real reasons for the higher propensity to crime among minorities, immigrants, and disadvantaged people. Anyone, like most people here, like most people in our congregation, as most of the people we know, anyone who has had the comfort of a stable environment in terms of family, country, financial advantage, the privilege of receiving an education, of learning how to write and speak, form an opinion and present a case, will never fully understand the sense of powerlessness felt by people who drop out of school at 10, who don't even go to school, can barely read, grow in abusive households, are denied opportunities because they do not fit in, learn from a very young age the only way to earn recognition It's by siding with the people who can teach you how to be feared by others and offer you protection, whatever the cost. There's a very interesting study by a woman called Mary Douglas, Natural Symbols. It was published in 1996, but it has been immensely influential and successful. And she shows, I put this in number 6 in your handout, she shows the gulf between the way professional class parents and their working class counterparts raise their children. What happens to children whose parents are stuck in authoritarian workplaces, she says, but workplaces that disempower them, that treat them make them feel less valued just because they are doing manual work, where they learn to take orders, and what they do is they pass on this culture to their children. They raise their children in the same way that they experience their working places, their working lives. Working class children are not given reasons for things. Now, this is a generalization, of course, it's not always the case, but this refers in particular to not any kind of working class, but working class people who work in disempowering environments when it comes to work. So the children are not given reasons for things. They are simply told that this is how things are, much in the way their parents are told at work. This is how things are. And according to Mary Douglas, these children grow up as prisoners of a speech code, what she calls restricted speech. By contrast, the children of the postgraduates and professionals, the ones in the school districts with pupil expenditure of 24,000 a year, now it must be much more than that, are encouraged to inquire, to get answers to their questions. And these children grow up with a sense of agency nearly parallel to the one that their parents enjoy at work. These are the children who grow up be able to engage in elongated speech codes where they learn to rationalize and give reasons. So that even if I've had friends or I've known people who have gone to Eton, in the UK, even if they are penniless after that, or even if they conduct lives in which they don't make money, they're always very privileged because they have a sense of agency, they have assurance wherever they go, they open their mouth and, they can explain things. And, there's nothing bad about that. But this makes a difference in terms of life kind of success when you're not given this sense of agency in your education as a child, or when you have been imprisoned in this restricted speech code. Most of us, number 7, have had paracletes, people who have been our advocates, not only by shielding us, but especially by affirming us at pivotal junctions in our life so that we could find our own voice, could become advocate for ourselves, for our lives and rights, for the causes in which we believe. Isaiah's prophecy and John the Baptist's declarations teach us that if nobody ever affirmed you, you will never be able to affirm yourself, let alone others. If you never had any paraclete, that is, if nobody ever advocated for you, you will never be able to advocate for yourselves, let alone for others. And this is why Isaiah does not start by saying that we should bring good news to the oppressed, blind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to the captives, release the prisoners, and comfort to all who mourn. We have to do this. But it doesn't start by saying that we should do this. But, and this is crucial, that we need first of all, to let the Lord or someone for him to do this for every one of us. Only after the Lord has provided for us, it is said that they, that is, those who have been comforted in this way, will in their turn be able to build up the ancient ruins and raise up the former devastations and repair the ruined cities at the end of this passage from Isaiah. So in this period of Advent, in which we are exposed to the way in which the God comes to affirm us, it's really the time to acknowledge the ways in which we have been comforted, affirmed, advocated for in our lives, and be grateful for this. Joining in Isaiah's thanksgiving, Isaiah says, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord, my whole being shall exult in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation, he has covered me with a robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself with a garland, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. Beautiful passage. And in the wake of this recognition, we should then look for the ways in which we, in our turn, can become the paracletes, the comforters, the advocates of our sisters and brothers, not only by being their voices, which again can be a way of patronizing people, but by helping them to find their voices in the difficult situations of their lives. So in this very moment, as we know, all around us, there are people who are not feeling at the most confident, are facing life-changing decisions, coping with illness, disability, or bereavement, of mental health issues, are in emotional distress. People who do not understand what is happening in their lives and why they feel paralyzed. People who do not have access to benefits, work opportunities, services, because they do not even know where to start and how to look for help. People who just need to be listened to. So consolation or comfort means advocacy. The world needs advocacy. Our society needs advocacy. And this requires us to first acknowledge the gifts we have received, be joyful and grateful for them, and ask ourselves how we can use them to repair ruined cities. You know, the social aspect of Christian identity is absolutely essential, and it is embedded in the prophecy of Isaiah. It's not just about individual salvation. It's about repairing ruined cities, and God knows if our cities are ruined because of their inequality, because of their injustices, and because of all the reasons you know. Improve broken or threatened lives. It does not take much. We have to listen to people without judgment, provide them information and guidance according to our expertise. And each one of us has an expertise in something, even just cooking. I mean, you know, if I know to cook, I can help other people to cook. Teach them to explore their options. A lot of people don't know what options they have in life. They have no idea. Nobody has ever taught them the options they are at their disposal. Affirm them in their decisions. Help them to articulate their needs. Be there for them. This will be our way of being witness, of testifying to the light, just as Isaiah did, and John the Baptist as well. We are not the light. We are not the Messiah. We are not prophets, like this priest was, Father Puglisi. We are not the Savior, and we don't need to be. We just have to be the conveyors of the consolation we have received, the enablers, the humble and let life-changing instrument of God's advocacy. And, you know, I quoted you this sentence by Father Puglisi, in which he said, you know, if everyone does something, then we can do a lot. Nobody is asked to change the world. But advocacy is really the currency our society, our church needs most. And I find that the time of Advent is not just a playing with words, Advent and advocacy, as I told you, but the time of Advent really is a time where we are invited exactly to do this, recognize the extent to which we are being advocated for, so as to be more conscious of our need and of our mission and of our duty, probably, to advocate for other people. So this is, a bit the reflection. You have some notes, something you can bring with you. But, we have probably 10 minutes now to talk a little bit and to say, please.
I want to ask, do I understand what you're saying? Okay, I took notes. The Lord must do this for us first. Affirmation, advocacy, provide for us comfort. And then before we can do any of that for ourselves, it's advocacy, advocate for ourselves. And then this ruins and devastations and ruined cities, that's a metaphor for like a destroyed life.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so only God can help you bring affirmation and for you and all this, and then in turn you can do it for yourself, and then you can repair your life based on how God helps you first.
Yes.
Is it right what I said?
It is. So the principle is that if you have not been affirmed in your life, affirmed or like
Told that you're good.
told that you are good,
Okay.
and receiving given the ability, given agency.
Okay,
Given agency, thanks to your education, thanks to
Okay.
the family you had, etc., etc. It is not surprising that you feel disempowered in your life, and that this frustration is one, certainly in places like Sicily, is one of the reasons why a lot of people are so easily prey of criminal organizations. It's just because they give them sense of agency, even if it's a twisted one, which nobody else has given.
the place of God and giving them that affirmation and encouragement and to help them improve their lives. So
I wouldn't say of God, but basically providing a kind of a substitute, illusory one, because obviously they give no agency at all to them. They enslave them even more. And but the principle is that it's very easy. I mean, I think this is something which is pretty easy to acknowledge. We often have a tendency to think that the prevalence of criminality in certain minorities or in certain neighborhood depend on, we're just tempted to think that there is something wrong with the people. Whereas the reality is that there's something wrong about our society that does not create the structures that empower these people, give them a sense of agency. So in biblical terms, counters them so that they do not need to resort to criminality in order to, first of all, live, but also to find that sense of agency or respectability or empowerment, which society doesn't provide them. So that's the essential principle. And this is valid also in our relationship with God, yes. So in terms of our mission, certainly something that being advocated for, we receive from our education in our life, etc., but it's something which, is magnified, obviously, in our relationship with God, because what God wants to do with us is to be a paraclete, our advocate.
Okay.
Anyone else wants to, please?
There's another side. And that's that children are growing up in families where there is no structure.
Yes.
And where men have satisfied their carnal desires, but they produce children and no structure for these children to grow up. And that is, and so these children have no example and no support.
Yes.
And they're lucky if they get into either a school or a church or
Yes.
someone to find someone who understands what's happening to them
Yes,
and gives them support.
yes,
But it is not, but it is our fault. It is their father and their mother and the fathers. But often aren't there. They don't stay there. They're going someplace.
yes,
And the mothers are they
Yes.
too.
yes,
So it's unfair.
yes. Yeah, that's a view, which is, I appreciate, yes. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, just a comment that it is an optimistic premise that you're putting forth. That it's just listening to this and trying to take it all in. I get a sense of helplessness because particularly, you know, in the United States and the major cities, how they've been dilapidated. And it seems like the government too, which is obviously powerful, does nothing to alleviate this situation, and directly or indirectly is actually promoting it. And as an individual, I feel helpless. I can pray, certainly. I can give money to a charity,
Yes,
but what do I do? I mean, I'm not Joan of Arc, as you stated, in
yes,
so many words.
yes. Well, thank you. But the thing is that, you know, was exactly the same situation, if not even worse, in the south of Italy. You know, I don't know if you've ever been to Palermo. Palermo is one of the most dilapidated cities you'll ever see. There are parts of the city which are entirely ruined. The story of these priests has captured the imagination of the whole country in Italy, precisely because, you know, where anyone or everyone said there's nothing can be done, or everyone was tempted to say, oh, the state doesn't do anything, the government doesn't do anything, so nothing can be done. He has shown the incredible power of doing whatever you can do in your little, you know, space by just providing a space where people, you know, could play, where people could spend that time without, you know, having a space where they could stay together, supporting their education. That's why I said earlier, I try to say, he's not doing anything special. Is maxim that if everyone does a little bit, we can do a lot. And in our congregations, in our society, at least, let's say in our congregations, we all have some expertise, an expertise of some kind. We all know something, a little bit of something. And just sharing a little bit of our expertise, just listening when we have the opportunity to do that, just being available, any form of service, any form of contribution, what is called civil society, which should be helped and should be, and the center of this should be the local community of the church, is absolutely essential as an integral part of the mission of Christianity in society. So if we don't do this, not only individually, but as a community, we are missing something essential for what it means to be Christians.
But also,
Please, so let's go on, please.
Thoughts came to mind when we say kind of the continuation of the sense of helplessness.
Yes.
Some of the kingdom.
Yes.
If you attribute it to the inadequacy of the family, to be part of the reason, and if we attribute it to hustle, I mean, someone said that the government may be or reinforcing it. I'm not sure what you mean by reinforcing it. I don't know what he's referring to, any benefits or anything like that. But I also, it was many thoughts, I don't know how to
Yes.
say that, but
Yes.
these are thoughts that there are reasons within the family and within the society at a systemic level. But we as Christians, individually and as part of the community, is any way we can take part in kind of steering the situation in a more positive direction.
Yes.
And that's advocacy.
Yes.
Giving voice to by listening, giving voice to people who are in distress.
Yes.
But I'm also thinking, in addition to giving money to some charities, their advocacy, which is happening within the community, we can be a part of. Like, some, advocacy for Black Lives Matters,
Yes,
but some other, social movements.
yes,
We believe are just, and I think we are part of, that we
Yes.
can be also part of that,
yes,
beyond just giving money.
yes,
So there are many things we can do. But,
Yeah.
It starts from within us. And the feeling that whatever we have received is a gift from God,
yes,
but whatever negative experience we have, God has already given us by His presence coming to earth and by His the message. So that is a gift and confirmation of exactly as human beings.
Yes.
So whatever we have, we know that it's a gift.
yes.
So that's how we can give.
Thank you.
So, I mean,
Thank you, but thank you. It's exactly. So we have literally 4 minutes, and I had 2 hands here and a hand there. But please be very short because you only have 4 minutes. Yeah, yes. Yeah, yes.
Well, this is series of event functions,
Okay.
and I want to be sure, so I said,
Yes. Okay.
and
Okay.
I think that the second sentence, to be sure, is that we all, including professors, like have value in a series of discussions of those premises and assumptions.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your thought. And we have another thing here.
again the name of the Palermo priest who was shot?
It's called Pino Puglisi. Pino, it's like Giuseppino Puglisi. Pugliese.
And the name of the murderer.
Oh, the matter I don't know. But if you Google him, you'll find it.
I will. Thank you.
I'm afraid we have to stop here. It was, yeah, please.
Well, I just want to comment that I
Yes.
think that it's my opinion, but the most important agency that any person can carry is his own individual moral agency.
Mm,
And those morals are not being taught in society.
yes,
We're tremendously secularized. And I have to say, the church bears responsibility.
yes,
The church, the voice of the church, the voice of truth, real justice, which is an examination of all the factors,
Yes.
does not exist.
yes. Yeah, thank you for this. So, I mean, the thing is that it is an invitation to think about advocacy and how central it is to the mission of the church and to our own personal vocation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in the new year. My pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you.